Claudia Flynn isn't just making moves, she's lighting a fire under the whole city, and everyone can feel the heat. The streets know her name, the crews fear her plans, and every step she takes pushes Chicago closer to something dangerous, something no one may be ready for. Claudia didn't climb her way up through luck or by playing nice. She stepped into the shadows with a hunger that only grew sharper with every deal she made. In a city ruled by power games and quiet threats, she learned faster than anyone expected. She learned how to watch people without them noticing, how to listen when others kept talking, and how to strike at the perfect moment. Every move she made came with a message. She wasn't here to blend in, she was here to take over. Chicago slowly started to shift around her. The whispers that once ignored her name began turning into warnings. People said she was fearless, but that wasn't true. Claudia felt fear just like anyone else. She simply refused to let it stop her. She pushed through it, used it, twisted it into fuel that kept her ahead of her enemies. The city gave her a small piece of control at first, but Claudia wasn't interested in just a slice. She wanted the whole thing. And she was ready to take it, no matter how many lines she had to cross. Her world grew larger as she moved deeper into the game. Every handshake came with a hidden threat. Every promise carried a price. But Claudia walked through it all as if she had been born for it. Her sharp eyes read danger before it reached her, and her quick mind turned even the smallest chance into an advantage. People underestimated her because of her past, because of her family, because she didn't fit the usual mold, but that only made her stronger. Every doubt, every insult, every closed door, she used them as stepping stones. Soon, the deals she touched weren't small side plays anymore. They were major moves, the kind that made crews nervous and made bosses look over their shoulders. Claudia found ways into rooms she wasn't supposed to enter. She connected with people who usually didn't trust anyone. She built a network that moved in silence, but hit like a storm. And with each new connection, she gained something more dangerous than power. She gained confidence. But the higher she rose, the more trouble followed behind. Chicago didn't like new rulers. The streets didn't stay quiet for long. Rumors started spreading that Claudia wasn't just rising, she was taking things that didn't belong to her. And while many feared her growing strength, others saw it as a challenge. One thing was clear. Claudia wasn't just becoming a player in the game. She was becoming a target to yet she kept pushing forward. She refused to slow down, refused to look back, refused to show weakness. With every deal she closed and every enemy she outsmarted, she reminded the city that she wasn't here to survive, she was here to dominate. And as her influence stretched across Chicago's darkest corners, one truth became impossible to ignore. Claudia Flynn wasn't just rising. She was becoming a problem, a big one. Claudia never planned on becoming the spark that set Chicago on edge. But once she stepped into power, the city reacted like dry wood catching flame. The balance between crews that had held for years began to crack the moment she pushed her influence past the boundaries everyone thought she'd respect. It didn't happen all at once. It started with small shifts, territories being watched more closely, deals being questioned, whispers turning sharper. But those little changes built up like pressure in a pipe, and soon the whole system started shaking under her moves. Her first real step into chaos came from a deal that should have stayed simple. Money in, product out, nothing complicated. But Claudia never had any interest in simple. She added her own twist, squeezing out more profit, cutting out middlemen, and stepping into spaces that weren't meant for her. The moment she did that, she crossed a line that couldn't be undone. Crew leaders who used to ignore her suddenly started paying attention. They watched her moves, studied her patterns, and tried to guess her next play. But Claudia didn't move like them. She didn't follow rules. She didn't wait her turn. She acted fast, sharp, and without hesitation. And that scared people. Not because she was reckless, but because she was smart. Her decisions caused waves that spread far beyond her circle. Crews began turning on each other over miscommunication. thinking someone was trying to steal territory when it was really Claudia adjusting one tiny piece in her plan. Supply chains shifted. Streets that used to stay quiet suddenly became dangerous. And every time someone tried to trace the cause, the path always led back to her, usually when it was already too late. But chaos doesn't grow without enemies. Claudia made those quickly. Some hated the way she worked in silence, never revealing her full plan. Others hated the way she could smile while setting up a move that cost them thousands. But the ones who hated her most were the people she outsmarted, men who were used to being obeyed, feared, respected. When Claudia walked into the game, she didn't bow to any of them. She didn't ask for permission. She took her place with a confidence that felt like a threat. As rumors spread about her rising power, pressure built from every direction. The streets buzzed with talk of her deals going too far, her influence growing too fast. People claimed she had no control over what she was starting. They whispered that she was playing with fire she didn't understand. But Claudia wasn't blind to the danger. She saw every risk clearly. She just didn't care. She believed that chaos could be controlled if you were the one who caused it. But the thing about chaos is this: once it begins, it doesn't listen to anyone. Her plans started creating outcomes she didn't predict. A truce between two crews fell apart when one side suspected she was backing the other. A shipment went missing after someone tried to double-cross her, setting off a chain reaction of revenge. And the police heat blew up higher than anyone wanted, drawing attention to places that used to stay hidden. Every one of these sparks turned into something bigger, and Claudia found herself at the center of a storm she built with her own hands. Still, she didn't slow down. That was the most dangerous part. Where others backed away, Claudia stepped deeper. Where others panicked, she calculated. She pushed forward even as the city grew louder with anger and fear. She believed she could handle the consequences, no matter how big they became. But Chicago isn't kind to people who disrupt its balance. And Claudia wasn't disrupting it, she was shattering it. The more she tried to control the chaos, the more the city pushed back. And soon, everyone realized something they should have known from the start. Claudia Flynn wasn't just causing trouble. She was becoming the reason every crew was preparing for war. Tommy Egan never cared about small fights or petty drama. That kind of noise doesn't shake him. But what Claudia was doing, that wasn't noise. That was pressure building, pushing Chicago toward the kind of explosion Tommy knew all too well. He had seen cities fall apart before: Queens, Brooklyn, Manhattan. He knew what it looked like when someone created problems they couldn't control. And when he watched Claudia making moves faster than she could cover them, he recognized a pattern immediately. A dangerous mix of ambition and overconfidence. A storm pretending to be a plan. The first time Tommy heard her name linked to a territory shift, he brushed it off. The second time he paid attention, by the fifth, he knew something was wrong. Claudia wasn't just expanding, she was disrupting every piece of the board. Deals he thought were solid suddenly started bending. People who used to stay loyal began acting nervous. Streets that were steady for months began to shake like they were waiting for something to snap. And the worst part, none of it was happening by accident. Tommy knew chaos. He lived in it, survived it, sometimes created it when he needed to, but even he had limits. He understood the rules of the street, the invisible lines no one crosses unless they're ready to deal with the fallout. Claudia didn't seem to care about those lines. She didn't fear the consequences. She didn't respect the history behind each corner, each crew, each silent agreement that kept the city breathing. She treated Chicago like a puzzle she could rearrange. And that's what made Tommy step back and really look at her. He could see the danger building around her like smoke around a fire. People were whispering her name in anger, bringing her up in meetings with clenched jaws and restless eyes. Crews who had nothing in common suddenly shared a goal, figuring out how to handle Claudia before she made things worse. Tommy listened to all of it, never reacting, never showing which side he leaned toward. But deep down, he knew he couldn't let this continue unchecked. The thing with Tommy is that he doesn't get involved without a reason. He doesn't protect people unless he sees something worth saving. And he definitely doesn't warn someone unless the situation is so serious that silence becomes a mistake. Claudia had reached that point. Tommy watched her rising influence and saw the trail of destruction forming behind her broken alliances. Angry bosses, damaged deals, streets hotter than before. She was pushing too fast, too far, too fearlessly. But Tommy also saw something else. Claudia wasn't evil. She wasn't careless. She was desperate to become something more than her name, more than her family's twisted legacy. She wanted to prove she was smarter, stronger, sharper, but in chasing that power, she was walking into the kind of trouble that could end her. Tommy understood that better than anyone. He had lived through it. He had lost people because of it. And he wasn't about to watch someone repeat the same mistakes without at least giving them a chance. So he stepped into the shadows, watching her moves, waiting for the right moment. Not to strike, but to speak. To warn her. To tell her the truth she wasn't seeing. But Claudia was too deep into her rise, too focused on her plans, too wrapped up in proving herself to notice the danger closing in. Tommy saw every knife being sharpened behind her back. Every alliance building without her knowledge. Every enemy preparing to make a move. He knew that if she didn't slow down, if she didn't start understanding the cost of the game she was playing, she wouldn't be a rising power much longer. She'd become a target. The kind of target the entire city hunts at once. And Tommy wasn't sure whether he'd be able to help her when that moment came. Or whether she would even listen. What he didn't know was simple. Claudia Flynn wasn't just causing chaos anymore. She was walking straight into a war and she didn't even realize she started it. Chicago has always been a city built on choices, silent ones. Dark ones, the kind people make in back rooms with lowered voices and hands resting close to weapons. But now, because of Claudia's rise, because of the chaos spreading through every corner, the city wasn't just choosing anymore. It was dividing. Lines were being drawn, not with words, but with tension that hung in the air like the smell of smoke after a fire. Every crew, every boss, every hustler felt it. Something big was coming. And they all knew they had to pick a side before the streets made that choice for them. Claudia didn't fully understand how fast things were shifting around her. She saw the challenges, the pushback, the noise, but she didn't see the full picture. She didn't know how many eyes were on her, or how many conversations were happening about her in dark corners she'd never stepped into. People weren't just annoyed or threatened anymore. They were preparing to defend what was theirs. Preparing to strike, preparing to make sure that Claudia's ambition didn't turn into their downfall. Some saw opportunity in her. The bold ones, the outsiders, the risk takers, they admired the way she moved. They liked her fire, her fearlessness, her refusal to bow down to the old systems. They whispered that she could change things, disrupt the power that had ruled for too long. These people were willing to stand with her, not because they trusted her, but because they believed she might reshape the game in a way that benefited them. But others, they saw a threat. A big one. To them, Claudia wasn't a rising leader, she was a storm that could sweep them all away. Someone who didn't respect tradition, didn't follow rules, didn't understand the weight of the city's history. They believed she was dangerous not because she was strong, but because she was unpredictable. And unpredictable people get handled quickly in Chicago. As these quiet alliances formed, the city shifted into a silent countdown. Every day felt heavier. Every night felt louder. The streets buzzed with danger, the kind that made people double-check who they trusted. Old enemies started talking again, not because they liked each other, but because they agreed on one thing. If Claudia kept pushing, Chicago would erupt. And none of them wanted to be on the losing side of the explosion she was creating. Tommy saw the divide forming too. He saw how quickly loyalties were breaking and reforming, how the power structure of the city was bending under Claudia's influence. He watched people choose, some siding with her, others plotting against her, some waiting in the shadows for the perfect moment to take advantage of the chaos. Tommy knew that once Chicago picked a direction, there was no turning back. Alliances become chains. Decisions become traps. And the city never forgives the people who force its hand. Claudia didn't slow down, even as the pressure wrapped tighter around her. She believed she could outthink the danger, outrun the threats, outmaneuver every enemy waiting to see her fall. She believed her ambition was enough to carry her through whatever storm was forming. She believed she could rewrite the game in her own image. But the thing Claudia didn't realize was this: Chicago doesn't change for anyone. It changes you. The city was shifting into war mode, and whether she wanted it or not, Claudia was at the center. Every move she made added fuel to a fire she couldn't see clearly yet. Every decision she pushed forward brought the city one step closer to open conflict. And for the first time, the people around her weren't focusing on what she was doing. They were focusing on how to stop her. Some wanted to protect her. Some wanted to use her. And some wanted her gone. But the truth was simple and deadly. Claudia Flynn had become more than a rising force. She had become the reason Chicago was preparing for its next big war. And when the city finally erupts, every side will blame her. Every side will hunt her. Every side will test how much power she really has, because Claudia isn't just in the game anymore. She is the game. And now everyone is ready to play against her. Power always looks beautiful from a distance. It shines, it glows, it pulls people closer like a flame in the dark. But once you're close enough to touch it, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Power burns. And now, the fire Claudia spent so long building was finally circling back toward her. Not as warmth, not as victory, but as danger creeping in from every side. For the first time since her rise began, Claudia could feel something shifting inside her world. It wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was the weight of choices that couldn't be undone. Every deal she made, every alliance she broke, every moment she pushed forward without looking back, the consequences were starting to take shape. They weren't loud yet. They weren't violent. But they were present. Like footsteps behind her in an empty hallway. Close, steady, getting louder. She noticed it in the way people spoke to her, the hesitation tucked behind their words. The careful tone that wasn't there before. She noticed it in the way her circle started shrinking. Not because she pushed people out, but because they backed away on their own. Loyalty in Chicago was never free, and hers was costing more each day. Some people stayed because they believed in her vision. Others stayed because they were scared to walk away. A few stayed because they wanted to see how far she could go before everything shattered. But Claudia wasn't blind to her own storm. She felt the pressure building like a hand tightening around her ribs. She didn't show it, not even to the ones closest to her. She kept her voice sharp, her steps steady, her mind locked on the goal she wasn't willing to give up. Her dream was simple. She wanted to stand at the top of the city without anyone claiming they helped her get there. She wanted her name to mean something powerful, not because of her family, not because of the past, but because of her own rise. Yet dreams built on broken lines always demand something in return. The harder Claudia pushed, the more the city pushed back. Supplies became harder to secure. Allies began asking questions they never asked before. Rivals started moving with bolder intentions, no longer hiding their anger or pretending to negotiate. Even the police pressure grew heavier, not because they caught her making mistakes, but because the chaos surrounding her drew attention she couldn't silence. And then there was Tommy, watching, waiting, calculating. He could see the cracks forming before anyone else did. He could see the danger creeping toward her long before she felt it. Tommy knew the streets better than anyone. He knew when a storm was coming, and the one around Claudia was close enough to taste. He didn't blame her for wanting power. He understood that hunger, but he also understood the cost that followed it. And Claudia was paying that cost faster than she realized. What Claudia didn't see clearly, what she couldn't see, were the shadows gathering just behind her rise. People meeting in dark rooms, speaking her name with a mix of fear and fury. Men who had been quiet for months suddenly returning to the game with one purpose: to stop her before she became unstoppable. Women who once supported her turning away because the heat was too dangerous to stand near. and old enemies resurfacing, not for revenge, but for opportunity. Claudia had created a space where ambitious predators felt invited, and they were coming fast. Still, she didn't slow down. She didn't retreat. She didn't second-guess her path. Instead, she pushed harder, believing that momentum alone could save her from the storm closing in. But momentum isn't protection. Momentum doesn't shield you when the whole city begins choosing your downfall. Chicago was no longer reacting to Claudia's moves. It was preparing for her collapse. And somewhere deep inside, even if she wouldn't admit it, Claudia knew the truth she'd been avoiding. Power wasn't the victory she imagined. Power was a debt. And every step she took added interest. Every risk she made added weight. Every enemy she created added another name to the list of people waiting for her fall. The rise had been thrilling. The chaos had been loud. But now came the part no one warns you about, the part where power demands its payment. And Claudia Flynn was about to learn exactly what that price looked like.